Yeah. When you're on a night out and your phone dies, Hugo is the guy who saves you.
It's a fairly simple business model, from idea to $1 million a month in about, I think it was 3 months.
Wow. Did you know when you had the idea, like, this is huge?
It was just this light bulb moment that for me, it was like, I am seeing the future here.
Just going back to the start then.
We managed to hustle our way into a festival for free, but we made $2,000 over that weekend. I think we signed up 100 sites before there was anything. Most businesses, you can't do that.
I was curious to understand how you managed to find the right co-founders.
The average business takes 10 years to build.
Did you always know you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
I had no idea what I was going to do with my life.
What made you think you could do two at once?
The answer is we couldn't. China is like 5-10 years ahead of the West. We thought COVID could kill it off. We had 100 charged up stations, and obviously we're not going to roll them out to deserted train stations. So replace where the charging station would go, put a little pump on the top and then a bag to hold sanitizer underneath, and repurpose them into sanitizer dispensers. They gave us this ultimatum. They were like, Sadiq Khan wants to reopen the tubes, you can have the contract. And none of it worked. I think the big piece of advice I would always give is,
but thanks for being here, man. It's really great that you're here. In many ways, you are saving lives all across the nation, which is awesome.
Oh God, I don't know about that.
Yeah,
that's the title of the video right there.
Yeah,
yeah. Clickbait.
And everyone's like, he's a doctor, surgeon. More important than any of that, when you're on a night out and your phone dies, Hugo is the guy who saves you.
That is what we do.
Yeah, Hugo Tilmouth, our guest today. Thanks for being here, man.
So just super exciting.
Yeah. So for anyone listening, just give us a summary, because obviously what I said was quite vague. So do you want to jump in?
Yes. Yeah. No, we've had a pretty wild journey so far. 5 years ago, started a company called ChargedUp. It was out of a problem I had myself, running out of charge when I was out and about. I was actually at a cricket match at Lord's, ran out of charge, ended up having to buy a power bank for 20 quid. I thought, this is bonkers. I'm a grad, spending 20 quid to keep my phone alive for one day. Surely there is a market here. Fast forward, I'm cycling a Boris bike home, and I thought, what if you combine these two things together of picking up a battery and dropping it somewhere else, similar to the Boris bikes? That's where ChargedUp came from. We're now in thousands of locations up and down the UK. You can just borrow a battery for £2 an hour, and then you're good to go. So started with that, and then it evolved into a full plethora of products for hospitality companies. And we started CleanedUp, which was a crazy journey in COVID.
Yeah.
And then more closer to today, we started ServedUp, which is a full payment suite for hospitality businesses as well. Okay. So loads of crazy stuff along the way.
Yeah,
that's a good journey then.
And what's CleanedUp?
So CleanedUp is the sanitizer thing that we did in COVID. It was 1 year from start to finish. It grew. It was doing, after about 2 months of it being alive, like literally from idea to $1 million a month in about, I think it was 3 months.
Wow.
And then, we sold it within the space of a year. So it was a nuts journey.
That's
like
insane.
Most of it from behind a laptop, because obviously we're in lockdown. I had no experience with anything to do with sanitizer, or shipping or logistics really. And we just kind of made it up as we went along.
And you sold it within a year. That's got to be the quickest exit. Like, that's got to be a Guinness World Record or something.
Especially for a good multiple as well. I'm guessing.
Yeah. It was all pretty weird, but it was a great learning journey, and definitely ups and downs along the way, but it was good fun.
So with ChargedUp, so obviously going back to the beginning, you're at Lord's, your phone dies, you buy this power bank, you see the Boris bike, you're on a Boris bike, you have that kind of the big brainwave.
Yep.
What's the next step? Do you call someone? Do you run it by someone? Do you call a manufacturer? I mean, what's the very first thing that you did when you got home?
Yeah, so this is kind of a few years before graduating. I was, had this kind of initial idea. So first idea was very basic. It was, why don't we make vending machines that vend out power banks that are fully charged with the cables, all this kind of stuff. So, start looking on like Alibaba and stuff. Can you make a power, is there such thing as a vending machine for power banks? Anyway, nothing really exists. So we're looking on the market, like what exists in the market, doing a bit of research, etc. This is all while, doing engineering at uni. The only thing that existed on the market was these charging lockers. And if you remember way back in the day, you'd go into like a Westfield or somewhere and you'd just lock your phone away.
Yeah, I remember that.
That's kind of all that existed. And I was like, surely there has to be a better way. Anyway, so we start trying to build this vending machine thing, like physically with 3D printers, motors, all this kind of stuff. in our university lab, which was quite a lot of fun.
And who's we, by the way?
So just me and a few friends from uni, basically.
Okay.
And yeah, so we start trying to do that. Obviously, like that's never going to be the end business, but I think there's this kind of beautiful combination of naivety and like, you know, optimism that comes together when you're like super young and you're first getting into something that meant that, you know, I kind of thought that could be the way to get to a business. But anyway, so we start building this thing and we start like pitching it to people, one of which was our kind of business professor or whatever you want to call him at the university. And he said, basically, great idea here, guys. You know, I love the enthusiasm, etc. But basically, if you can prove to me that people will pay for this thing, I will give you $2.5 grand. Sorry. Well, I will give you $2.5 grand equity free for absolutely nothing to go out and prove if people will pay for this. And then I'll give you another $2.5 grand to kind of take it to the next step. Yeah. And so, you know, like very, very early on, someone being like, you need to go out and like prove that this is something that people will pay for, I think was like one of the most invaluable lessons that we were taught like super early days. And this dude, Joe Pierce, he's, you know, I'm still in touch with him now. He's a great guy. That was like a really, really significant moment. He sat us down and made us think like, how do you go from absolutely nothing to something that people will be willing to pay for with $2.5 grand? Like most businesses, you can't do that.
Yeah, that's peanuts.
Yeah. I know,
it's nothing.
It really is nothing. So obviously there's no way we can build an app with that. We can't find a manufacturing partner and all this kind of stuff. So we have to go like super, super basic, like boil down the idea to the most minimum viable product possible. And for us, that was to buy some power banks off eBay or Amazon or whatever, put numbers on all of them, and then make like a little, you know, tracking sheet on Google Sheets or whatever. Yeah. And go to a festival. We managed to hustle our way into a festival for free. And we had a stand at this festival. And
Can I ask what festival it was?
It was the most rogue festival. Like it wasn't a cool festival. Okay. It was like the agricultural show in Cornwall. Okay.
There's a reason you got in there for free, basically, is what you're saying.
I think Kanye was headlining.
Yeah, on his JCB tractor or whatever. Like it was seriously rogue. But anyway, you know, there's all these thousands of people. So we were sat there in the pouring rain. There's some great photos of us there with our little power banks, and we had a little iZettle card machine to take their money. And yeah, we rented out these things, and I think we were charging £10 to borrow it, and then if you returned it, you got a bit of a refund kind of thing. Super like basic setup, but we made $2 grand over that weekend.
Okay, wow.
And obviously, it's not scalable to have 3 people sat there at a stand all the time doing this. But it proved the concept that people want to pay to charge their phone, and this idea that you know, if you pay, then you borrow the battery and then you return it. That kind of came true, even though we were the machine that was kind of renting and returning the batteries. Yeah.
Just with the batteries on that point, how did you prevent theft?
Yeah, that was my first thought.
Yeah. So
especially in the early days where you didn't have the technology to actually track, and
it was so basic. It was you pay £10 now. And then we somehow, I can't remember how we did it on iZettle, but we would refund either £1 or £2 or £3 or nothing if they took it away, basically. So it was, the most basic setup ever, but we already had their money if they took the battery. And that's kind of how it works now, fast forward 5 years. We basically take their card details, and if they rent the battery, they just pay £1. And if they keep it, then they pay £30. You know, it's the exact same concept, but just with a load of tech in between. That means that, you know, I don't have to be sat in thousands of bars renting out batteries and taking them back.
How many did you have at the festival?
I feel like it was maybe 100, maybe 200. Right. You know, it wasn't a huge number, and they were just generic batteries. Like we branded them up, and they had this hideous logo that I designed with like the little battery on it and our old ChargedUp name and all this stuff. So we branded these things up, and they had all the cables in there and everything, and then just rented them out. And that was the thing that allowed us to move to the next stage. He gave us the $2.5 grand. We then went off, and then we started pitching for some competitions to get the next bit of funding. I think the first one that we got was with Shell. So we pitched for like a young founder, whatever competition. And I think we got 10 grand from those guys, something like that, which obviously, you know, it doesn't sound like a huge amount of money now, but like at the time it was game changing. Like that was the reason I was able to continue like working on this thing. Not that I was drawing a salary, but it was the kind of amount of money that was necessary for us to keep progressing once I'd graduated. And for me, it was like, if we win this thing, I'll keep doing it. If not, I'll go and get a real job. And it just kept going. And then we did another one, and I think we got 15 grand from O2. Again, equity free. There's so many of these competitions out there. It is quite amazing that all of these big corporates they kind of give out this cash for. Especially young founders, like people who are under 30, etc. I think there's more available to that. And then also if you're doing something related to eco stuff, whether it's battery tech or whatever, there's all sorts of competitions available, and you just have to go for them. And we did. And then ultimately the O2 thing led into something else, and led into and then it just kind of snowballs from there. But it was very much one foot in front of the other from that early start.
Okay.
Well, I was going to say, so you had the batteries that obviously you just bought on eBay. Did you then, when you went to do it kind of properly, did you use the same process, kind of just buying batteries on eBay and then putting a sticker on? What was did you get them made custom?
Yeah, so obviously it was a much bigger job to actually build the units, because they had to, if you think about it, like it's a charging dock, but they have to be able to somehow, like release a battery via an API, connect to an app, take payments on an app, and then when they return, it needs to like log that and then take the payment on the app. All of this kind of stuff. Like it's way more complicated than just buying it on some generic store or whatever. So in order to build all of that stuff, we basically had to go out and raise some investment. So we joined this program called Virgin Crowd Boost. I believe it's still running. I highly recommend it. If it is still running, it was like an 8-week intensive program where you went through all sorts of different experts every week, everything from like branding to making a pitch deck to how to do your SEIS and on EIS and all of the kind of stuff that you need to learn when you're first starting out. And as part of that process, one of the things was to pitch to what we were told was a fake investor, like a practice investor. And we would go in and we would pitch to them, and they'd give us feedback on our pitch. And obviously, we were somewhat nervous going into it, but didn't really realize how big a deal it was going to end up being on the flip side, because once we pitched, they kind of sent us an email. We were the only one that got the email, and they said that they wanted to invest in the company. So it went from a bit of a kind of practice pitch, to them investing. I believe it initially started as 150K, and then it actually went up to 200K from their kind of syndicate of angels. But yeah, again, it was just good fortune. Like I guess we applied for this Virgin Crowd Boost thing, and we threw our all into it. But then just randomly, these guys were willing to take our pitch, and that's what led to us getting the 200 grand, which led to us having enough money to fly out to China and find a manufacturing partner out there, and hire a team of developers that we hired out in India, and start building the application. And yeah, it was pretty crazy, but we managed to pull it together somehow.
So with the venues and getting the actual sort of slot and the kind of the batteries and the venues, how did it work in terms of, are you just sort of on foot grassrootsing it, hitting up, walking from pub to shop to whatever it is every day, being like, hey, can we put this in your place? Or did you was it cold email? And also, what do they get out of it? I feel like that would be a question they would have. Yeah,
it's great question. So it was exactly what you said. Like door to door, here is, and we had to do it before we even had a product, because, we didn't have the unit from China at that point, and there was nothing, so the initial thing was, we 3D printed a unit. I bought a 3D printer for like 300 quid or whatever, and 3D printed this unit, and it looked like what the station would be. And we were just going like door to door from all of these pubs in Shoreditch, actually. That's where it all started. And pitching them on this thing. And it was like an iPad with like, this is all the features and stuff. And then a landing page on a website. And then this 3D printed unit that looked like what a charging station would look like. And we showed them, this is what it's going to be. We need to get you guys signed up. And I think we signed up 100 sites before there was anything. Like there
Wow.
was it was just like images and this like unit that looked kind of real.
Yeah.
But there was nothing
Yeah.
behind it. And again, that contributed to the guys saying, look, we'll invest in this thing and help you bring it to market. Again, it's like, I think especially when you're starting out, and I was literally fresh out of uni, zero kind of credentials on the CV or anything like that. It was like proving stuff on zero money. That was kind of the key, and getting people to show that they are willing to like either sign up for your thing or pay for it. These were the things that like really helped contribute, because clearly we couldn't show that we had a product yet. We didn't have like 1,000 users or 10,000 users that were already using it. And there was a lot of money up front that you had to pay to develop this stuff. So yeah, we just tried all of these different methods to kind of, almost like fake it to get the customer demand and then fake it to get the business demand so that, we could get that sign up list. And then, yeah, off the back of that, we were able to raise that money.
And what sort of pushback were you getting then from the companies and sort of venues that you were talking to?
Yeah, I guess, first thing is hospitality people, they generally, they're kind of slightly distrusting of new tech. Like it's always been an industry where there's a little bit of skepticism.
Yeah, I've worked in hospitality for a while, so I've seen that firsthand.
Yep. So it's like the first question is, who else has got this thing? And when no one else has got this thing, the answer is, well, hopefully you guys. So it's slightly tricky to kind of get the ball rolling. But I think going back to your kind of second part two of the question before is like we were pitching them on the fact that this thing, it doesn't cost them anything. Like there's literally no cost for having this unit. Just plug it in, leave it on the side, and it'll do a great job. Number two was like safety of their guests. So people if their phones are running out, how are they going to get home safely? How are they going to message their friends, get an Uber, use the Tube app to like figure out where they're going to get the train back or any of this kind of stuff. So there's a safety aspect to it. And also third thing is, it gives the guests a better experience. Like they stay in the venue longer, they spend more money.
True.
And they're not going to leave like unhappy. So
Yeah,
it's kind of quite an easy sell from that perspective, because it's kind of like, just test it. If you don't like it, if no one uses it, give us a call. We'll come pick it up next week. But we've got people who were signed way back then, like 5 years ago, with the original hardware, like the worst version of the product that we ever released. And I popped into one who's just signed up to ServedUp now, our latest business, and they've still, they've got a newer version of the thing, but it's still in the same place as the one that was there 5 years ago.
Yeah.
Which is really, really satisfying because it's such a low maintenance product. It just sits there, helps their guests out, and doesn't really interfere with things. And the final thing that we kind of leveraged a little bit was that there was a pub that burnt down because someone had like plugged in a phone and left it overnight, like a guest's phone on like a dodgy, like cheap, like charging set or whatever. And we always leverage that. It's like the horror story of you don't want this. Let the guests use a pat tested, like certified device, and also they're plugging it in and using it on their table, whatever. You're not taking any liability for their phone. It was quite an easy sales pitch, to be honest.
And also it's a case of like, if you're sort of a party goer and you're going out, just made myself so uncool. If you socialize,
it came across on camera as well, don't worry.
If you actually leave your bedroom like a freak, if you're going out, the cool thing is that if you know a venue has that kind of stuff and another venue doesn't, I'm going there every single time. If I know that I'm going to be able to charge my phone while I'm there and that one doesn't have it, that might not be the only deciding factor. But as in, that's definitely a factor. Which ties me into my next question, which I'm really curious about, which is that like, I'm a big marketing geek. That's like my thing. And what I find so like amazing about this business model is the fact that obviously you have to pitch to the sites and the venues, but once it's in the venue, they get the foot traffic.
You've nailed it.
So you're literally piggybacking off their audience.
Exactly.
That is so genius.
Yeah, it's so nice. And so interestingly, there's two sides to this story. So the good side is that we don't have to like pay to get new people to use this thing.
There's no user acquisition.
It literally sits on the bar and people just go up and use it. And like, it's super weird going all the way back to the beginning where there was nothing. There's people who've either copied the idea or had the same idea, developed the same product and released it subsequently. And obviously it's more of a thing now, like it's 5 years on, etc. But even in that first venue, like I remember installing it on the bar in this site in Shoreditch on Brick Lane called the Big Chill. Still there, still, you know, it's still going strong. But we installed it on the bar, and people just went up to it and used it. And that was like the real light bulb moment for me. Like, you know, it was like this thing is actually real. People don't need to be educated on how to use this thing. They literally go up to it, read the little backboard, and it says download this app, and then they do it, and then they rent a battery, and it all just makes sense. Like, it's such a simple concept, and yet, you know, somehow, I guess, you know, because it's so simple, people just got it immediately out the box. I guess the flip side of that, you know, good side is we get free customers from them. The flip side is we tried so many different methods to like get more people to use it, like different marketing channels. We did so much rogue stuff. Like we had like influencer marketing, we did paid advertising, like Facebook ads, also, you know, all the typical stuff, and none of it worked. Literally nothing worked on the marketing side.
Why was that?
So I think the reason is, in order to get someone at the point, like, you need to get them when they're either in a pub or about to go into a pub or moving around and they're low on charge. It's so difficult to get that exact moment. You'd have to spend an absolute fortune to make an impact on it.
Because also, are you advertising a nearby pub? So
This is
you're
the thing.
you're sort of running an ad for a venue that you don't own.
Yeah.
You're sort of doing digital marketing for them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's a really tricky one. The only thing that did work for us was promotion within a venue. So once they're already in there, you know, putting leaflets out on the tables, all this kind of stuff, that does work. But to be honest, again, it's not really worth it for us for that extra maybe couple of rentals that we're getting for £2 a rental. It's not worth us sending someone in, putting loads of flyers up, all this kind of stuff. We tested it all. And ultimately, the best thing to do is just pick a really good site and make sure that they put it in a prominent place on the bar.
Do you build an email list off the opt-in, like when they use the QR code?
So we, like, from the ChargedUp side, we do have the data of the customers, but it's more, we don't really leverage it that much. We've done stuff in the past, but to be honest, the main thing is just have as many sites as possible visible, you know, and make it so that people can always access it when they're out and about in a bar. And that's what seems to work best. And we, you know, in the past 2 years, we've gone, without revealing the exact numbers, we've over tripled the amount of revenues per station without doing all of this marketing. Wow. So, you know, the numbers are going up and to the right, which is amazing. And it's more just because we have more locations for them to pick it up, drop it off. And then the final thing is we now have the technology which allows you to just tap your credit card. So if your phone is completely dead and you don't have the app, you know, you can just tap your credit card and a battery pops out. And it's had a massive impact on, you know, the number of rentals that we see in the network.
I'm sure. Do you know what your revenue was for the last year, by the way?
I do, yes.
Is there any? Are there any public numbers for how long? I don't know how. I mean, you know, how long it's been public or been going in that sense. But like, do you have any public figures?
Not ones that we're really able to share. But
that makes
you know,
sense,
the ChargedUp business is absolutely booming at the moment. Like, it's gone from strength to strength. Given, you know, we thought COVID could kill it off. Like, I think we're you know, in the pubs, like the places that got shut first, and it's basically reliant on people being out and about to need it. And then number two, you have to like share this thing. And like, you remember right at the beginning, everyone was freaking out about touching stuff. Yeah. And this is a bloody shared power bank. It's like
in public venues.
Yeah. It's like, we thought that was going to completely kill the business, but you know, luckily it's come back really, really strong. Yeah. And you know, we've got massive expansion plans over this year, over the next few years. Like, we're launching in literally tens of cities across the next 2 quarters across Europe and Australia, Middle East, etc. Like, there's so much stuff going on that business. From the point that we, you know, where we thought it was going to be dead and gone, it's completely you know, phoenixed or whatever.
Do you know how many venues you are in now as of today?
Yeah. So we're in, as of this day, we're about 2,000 locations, but by the end of Q2 this year, we're going to be in about 5,000 locations. So
okay.
Yeah, it's growing pretty fast.
Come back strong. Essentially fine. Yeah. Just going back to the start then, I was curious to understand how you managed to find the right co-founders. You say you started with your mates, but I think a lot of the time it can be quite tricky to find the right match of skill sets from the outset. So how did you go about finding that?
Yeah, it's definitely super difficult. I think it's one of the most difficult things is, the people in a business. You can control the tech, you can kind of solve for all of these problems, but the people is always going to be tricky, especially when you have zero network. Like you're with the people that are on your course, or the people who you're friends with at uni, whatever. That's a very limited pool of people, and of course, not everyone who like maybe is excited to get involved in the early stages is going to want to grind it out for 5 years, maybe 10 years. Like the average business takes 10 years to build. That's like valuable. Not everyone is going to want to stay on that journey. So, unfortunately, the two guys that were on my course are no longer involved in the business. We're all still good friends, and it's all very happy about whatever situation. But it didn't kind of work out in the end. But I brought on a little like later into the journey, brought on another co-founder, and he's very much still involved, and he kind of has a very different skill set to me, and brings a lot to the table. But yeah, it's
was
one
that
of these,
someone you knew beforehand, by the way? Was that a friend or
no?
Okay,
So it's kind of a friend of a friend, known only through business, which I think is actually the better way of doing it. I think kind of it can work out, and I've seen I've got friends who are founders who are friends before and then became like business partners second. But I think it actually works out better if you're kind of meeting through business and then developing something off the back of that. But there is no right answer to how you solve for the co-founder problem. I think there's loads of people that try and solve it. You've got these kind of accelerator programs and incubators that try and solve it by just throwing a load of people in a room together and then finding a technical person and then a kind of salesy, businessy person and then trying to pair those two people up. But even in those cases, you're trying to figure out, do you want to work with someone for 10 years in the space of maximum like 10 weeks? There is no perfect scenario, I don't think. But I think the big piece of advice I would always give is don't go for someone who is the same as you. Like if you're salesy, outgoing, super interested in like raising investment and going out and pitching the product, go for someone try and find someone who is the opposite of your skill set. For me, my weaknesses would be around like detail and finances and just really like being in the weeds of like completer finishing, all of that kind of stuff, which is
me both, brother.
It's like the antithesis of like typical kind of founder type personality. But what I did and what I learned is that you have to find someone who is amazing at that, loves it, like gets like energy from being in the detail. Yeah,
this guy, right?
Find the yin to your yang or whatever, and that's when then really succeeds. And now we've got a COO who is very much that type of person, and she takes a lot of that kind of strain off me rather than being me just kind of struggling through and not doing a great job at it.
Sure, it seems like a fairly on paper at least, it seems like a fairly low overhead business because you buy the stuff, you put it in the venue, it makes its money back. Are you open to say how much the actual things sell to units for and things like that? Or is
it's a fairly simple business model. Like it costs a few £100 to buy these units, and then they make their money back in a few months. So it is fairly simple. And we've been very, very fortunate that business has now become profitable, and it's continuing to grow on that front. So it's a really, really nice business, and very excited about the future.
So with marketing being not really much of an expense, is the main cost of the business the actual manufacturing?
Yeah. Like the kit itself does cost, because obviously you don't buy one, you buy thousands of them, and then you got to install them and all of that. But it's a good ROI. You're getting your money back quite quickly, and there's all sorts of clever things that you can do to kind of smooth over the cost of that, etc. But it works pretty nicely.
No, go on.
I was just going to say, go ahead. Well,
I was going to say from the beginning, because to me, I mean, it's such a brilliant idea. I mean, it's like
it's also one that's everyone's thought of, but no one's actually done.
And that's what I mean.
That's the thing, which is normally the good one.
Because we've had all sorts of guests on, and every business we've had on has been genuinely very interesting. But not all of them either I've known, or it's in an industry that has nothing to do with me, and I learn about it and I go, that's very interesting. But it wouldn't necessarily apply to me. This is something where I'm like, I mean, I've literally been in bars and I've seen that, and I've worked in bars and I've seen that.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, and so it's crazy that I'm like, this is such a great idea because it is on a night out. If you think about the top like 5 things people will complain about, it's like bars shutting too early.
Yep.
Not like, you know, takeaway places shutting too early, whatever. And my phone died. And so it's such a great. So my question is sort of long-winded way of saying, did you know when you had the idea like, this is fucking huge. This is actually really, because that's what I feel. I would be like, this is massive.
Of course.
You're solving a massive problem.
Yeah. But my big concern was like, surely someone has done this before. And then I kept looking and it was like, okay, there's some people like solving things around it, but not the core thing, which was you're in the bar and you need to get your phone charged. And there's people trying to make like, you know, little pads that you could put your phone on, but that cost the bar thousands of pounds to install. So obviously they're not going to do it because, you know, it's just not worth it to them. And then, like I said, there's the charging lockers in the shopping malls. And again, the shopping mall had to pay for it. Therefore, it would only be in really fancy places like a Westfield, not in the kind of random pub in the middle of nowhere or, you know, whatever. So I think it was actually less so, you know, the idea of like charging someone's phone. It was actually the flip of the business model that was that you as a customer paid for it and effectively just applying the vending machine model to it, and then making it so it was free for that venue to take that unit. That was the smart bit of it all. And then obviously like just going for it as well. That's always the thing, you know, because the amount of people that have said, oh yeah, I had that idea as well. But it's like, you also have to then go out and like do it. Fly to Shenzhen and like find a translator out there and, you know, figure out a factory and all of that crazy stuff. But yeah, it's a fun business. I've learned a lot building it.
Yeah, I bet. No, I bet. I mean, looking at that then on the tech side and the kind of back end of the business, once you secured the investment, how did you actually go about practically finding someone to build the back end of the business? Because that's obviously quite a big job and the main expense, right?
Yeah. So I did engineering at uni. So I could, you know, I could figure stuff out. I could Google stuff, whatever, and do a little the tiniest bit of coding possible. So I decided I was going to be the product guy in the team. And so I went out on Upwork.com, you know, it's like Fiverr or whatever, that kind of thing. And I put out this post, which was incredibly like the most detailed spec ever, of exactly what we wanted building with this app, you know, iPhone app, Android app, and then like a kind of portal to control all the stations, and then a connection into this hardware. And I think I interviewed over 100 different agencies across the world, mainly in India, because at the time that was kind of the main place that people would go for like outsourcing technology. And yeah, I interviewed all of these people and whittled it down to 1 or 2 agencies, and then we ended up going with this company. And you know, I think it was probably a bit of luck or whatever, but they were able to actually produce the thing. You know, it wasn't because they could have completely bamboozled me. I wouldn't have known if they could do it or not. It was kind of just good fortune that they actually could do it. And yeah, we hired these. I think it was 3 people to start with, and they just started cracking on and, you know, building the application. And obviously I was kind of managing that day to day and figuring out what product management meant and all of that stuff. But, you know, the fact that I was the most technical person in the team means that there was no technical people in the team. Like it was definitely a learning curve.
So how did you know that they were the right agency to use then? If you weren't the tech guy, how did you know when you were interviewing 100 agencies? As you say, any of them can bamboozle you. So how did you know that they were the ones that could actually do?
Yeah, I don't know. I think if I remember back, they had some experience doing hardware integration. So they'd like worked with factories in China and done that kind of firmware, hardware element, which is definitely like, it's way more niche. If you're just trying to find someone who can build you like a web app or an iPhone app, super easy to do. Finding that agency that also has experience with hardware, because these guys, I think they developed some toys and some other bits and pieces beforehand. So that gave me a degree of confidence. But honestly, like it was, like I said, it was definitely an element of luck that they actually could do it, because I had no idea what language the units were going to be written in or whatever. And maybe they didn't either, but they kind of figured it out. And they obviously, they allowed us to launch it. We got to 100 sites using the tech that they built before we made our first technical hire in the UK, you know, like in-house. And unfortunately, the kind of end of the story is that they ended up rebuilding everything because it wasn't actually that great. Right. And it kept falling down every Friday when people rented too many batteries and all of that. But it doesn't really matter because like ultimately we wouldn't have been able to afford that like CTO at the time. And the guys in India, they did an incredible job at getting us to those 100 sites that allowed us to, you know, raise more money. That's when we raised 1.1 million at that 100 site mark. And, you know, if we hadn't been able to do it on the shoestring budget, we wouldn't have got to the next step. So it's, you know, it's like I said, it's just one foot in front of the other. And yeah, ultimately the code went in the bin, but they got us to the next stage.
So much of this game, just in business in general, is just leveraging. It's just leveraging like one thing that's about to happen, and hopefully that doesn't fall through before I can jump to this branch. So I can then leverage that, and then I've got this branch coming up. And that's just honestly like half of it.
Yeah, it's like rock climbing, right?
Yeah, literally. I think the life of an entrepreneur is obviously notoriously intense, and obviously it's a lot of work and crazy hours and very antisocial. How have you managed to sort of navigate waters like relationships, friendships, things like that? Because obviously, you know, your work schedule probably, you know, isn't as set as like a 9 to 5. What's that been like?
Yeah, I don't know. It's I've never really struggled with it. I'm quite like a always on person anyway. Like I was always starting random businesses and loads of different ventures. Yeah, all through the years. So I think people like I've been with my girlfriend for like 9 years now. Yeah, and I think she knew me when I was doing that, like weird random events companies. I had a drone business at one point. I did all sorts of weird stuff. So it was kind of all to be expected. And also, like, I think I've always been able to kind of switch off as well and be quite like, you know, okay, now I'm focused on this thing, and now I'm at home and I'm just like chilling and, you know, just watching some, you know, shitty TV or whatever. You know, it's like you can have those two different modes. It doesn't have to be one or the other, always on kind of thing.
Have you got any advice for someone who doesn't know how to switch off?
That's what I was about to say.
I'm not saying that I do.
No, I struggle. I struggle with that. I'm always, I can be relaxing, and in the back of my mind, way back there, I'll be like, I've got that Instagram thing I have to post, and I have to. I can't. How do you do that?
I think my way of doing it is just always like adding it to a list, like just having lists of stuff that you need to complete. Yeah. Because as soon as I've like, even if it's like some big, quite scary thing that you need to do tomorrow or whatever, as soon as I add it to a list, I feel calm because I know that I'm going to get to it, and I know that I will do it tomorrow, even if it's at like, you know, 6 a.m. in the morning tomorrow. It doesn't really matter. I just know that it's now dealt with because it's kind of like the job is now done for today. There's no point really mulling over it in your head and and you know, just going around in circles, because you can think about that tomorrow. And I don't know, like it's maybe it's just how my brain is set up, but I just think about stuff in like boxes, and you just chuck it in the box, think about that tomorrow. And I definitely think that helps. But also, you know, all the typical stuff of like, you know, spend time with your friends, you know, do sport, like, you know, all of these kind of things do genuinely make a big difference as well. And, you know, don't get too trapped in, I need to work 24/7 in order to make this thing work, because sometimes it actually, you need to step back from it and, you know, go on the bloody Boris bike, and then you think of an idea or whatever it is, like you never know where that thing's going to come from. And sometimes changing context or whatever actually makes a massive impact, and then you figure out how to solve that thing.
Yeah, for sure.
What did your parents say to you when you first started the business? Because obviously you had a good university, I mean, a good degree. Yep. Was there any element of them trying to push you into a slightly safer, more corporate route?
It's a good question, because, you know, both my parents, they didn't start businesses themselves. They were, you know, they've been successful, and they've, you know, had great careers, etc. But they didn't go down that kind of, you know, slightly more risky route. And I think that maybe there was an element of like, I think with my mom, she was like, you know, wanted me to do something like that. And she was also quite happy for me to just like test it out for a bit as well. Okay. You know, I lived at home with them for a year, and, you know,
that's the time to do it, right?
Exactly. And, you know, I think there's always going to be a bit of hesitancy or whatever. But the way I pitched it to them was like, okay, I'm going to give this thing a shot for 6 months. If it doesn't work out, I will just go out and get a grad job like everyone else. Yeah. And like, worst case scenario, I'm 6 months behind them. It's not that big a deal.
Yeah.
You know, and so, you know, 6 years later, still haven't got the grad job.
Yeah. There's still time. You mentioned obviously you started a bunch of kind of businesses or failed business ideas and stuff like that. Did you always know you wanted to be an entrepreneur?
I don't know, to be honest. I think I never really thought about it as entrepreneurship. It was just kind of like, I was just like doing random stuff.
Yeah.
You know, like
Or did you always want to know you wanted to work for yourself in some capacity?
again, I don't think so. Because, you know, I did a ton of, I literally did like 1 million internships because I had no idea what I was going to do with my life. I think I did like at 12 or something, you know, like, and it was, I did everything from like architecture to working in Deutsche Bank for one summer. And like, I did a tech startup and then like an investment firm and like all sorts of different stuff, like just to try, because I was genuinely like, I don't really know what I'm going to be that good at. And I also don't really know what I enjoy. And the thing that did resonate, the thing that really like flipped me over was I worked for one summer at this place called PaveGen. It was it's still going now, but it's a company that makes these floors that you walk on, and it generates electricity as you walk on it.
Okay.
And the dude who started it, he was like a massive inspiration because he'd come straight out of university, and he started this business, and you know, raised money and did all of that kind of stuff, and built a business without going in and getting like a real job. You know, that was a major thing for me. And then the other one that was a big inspiration was this company called Tilt that I worked with, did some stuff for. And it was like this big tech platform out of the US from Silicon Valley. And they were doing all sorts of crazy stuff with payments. But again, I was like, it kind of gave me that exposure to the world of technology and how you can build these like super scalable products. And, you know, I think those two were like the two experiences that resonated the most with the stuff I enjoy and like that kind of startup-y entrepreneurial thing. And then, yeah, then it kind of just happened quite naturally. Like there wasn't some grand master plan at the start of it. It was just, you know, here's an idea and can we solve it? And yeah, then we've somehow figured it out.
Would you say you're passionate about the business that you're running at the moment?
Yeah, I love it. It's great fun. Like now we've kind of built a few different things. I was less passionate about the sanitizer. You know, it's like how excited can you get about ethanol and, you know, cleaning your hands?
Yeah.
Let's be honest.
I don't know, man.
Look at it the right way.
Sounds like my Saturday night. Yeah.
Yeah. Weirdly, we in COVID we actually used I think it was about 20 tankers worth of whiskey, like the ethanol that would go into whiskey. So it was kind of interesting.
Yeah.
And we got it all sent from a distillery up in Scotland. And
Wow.
Anyway.
What are you doing? Research.
Yeah. Sadly, the ethanol on its own, I think, may kill you rather than
Yeah, it's not going to be the job of that. Yeah.
But no, I like obviously the tech and the building, like the building the products. I love all of that stuff. We also get to work with super cool companies, you know, the coolest pubs and bars and restaurants and all of these places. But the thing that I love the most about this is it's like super scalable tech, but there is also something in the real world that you can see. And like, you know, like you said, you've been working in these places and you've been into these bars where you've seen it. Like 99% of tech companies, unless you're in that industry, you'll have no exposure to it. Whereas with ChargedUp, like even when we had 100 sites, I had friends, you know, from school or whatever, who were sending me photos of the units because they'd seen it in their local bar. And there's something really cool about like that physical world crossover with technology that I really like. And that then led into obviously the payment stuff, which again, it's like, it's a digital product, but it's like in bars, it's in the real world. There's like a tangible element to it, which definitely like, it's something that I really like about what we've done so far.
Obviously running a company takes a lot of time and a lot of work. What made you think you could do two at once and start?
Wow.
And where'd that come from? Not like a, who do you think you are?
No. It's well, I guess the answer is we couldn't. That was the that was like the kind of end of it. So we tried to do both, and what we saw was that ServedUp was growing, but ChargedUp was, because it wasn't getting any love, it was starting to go down and down and down. Anyway, the end result was that we hired a managing director for that business, someone who could just completely take all
for which
of
one?
for ChargedUp.
For ChargedUp, okay.
Yeah. Someone who could take on all of the mental strain and, you know, whatever, all the kind of laying up at night thinking about how to solve whatever problem. And that is like one of the best decisions I've ever made, is bringing someone in to just like own that. Because if I tried to continue to wear both hats and like, you know, in the morning think about one business, in the afternoon think about the other, it just never would have worked. You have to get someone who can just like focus on it. And it means that I can check in with him and, make sure it's all going all well, but I don't have to think about it the rest of the time. Like maybe it's 1 hour a week that I'm thinking about it, but the rest of the time I'm focused on the other business.
Yeah.
And, I can stay laser focused on making that a big success. But yeah, I wouldn't recommend trying to do 2 at the same time. I don't like Elon Musk with his like 5 different businesses.
He's an anomaly.
It doesn't make sense. I don't think normal mere mortals can do that.
Yeah, that's true. So I was going to say, with ServedUp, where did the actual idea for that come from, and what made you think about it enough to actually want to make a business out of it?
Yeah, so it was actually the first time I was out in China. So when we flew out to China to find this factory, we were obviously, it was a very serious business trip, but we also had quite a lot of fun. I never realized how modern and actually super cool the hospitality nightlife scene is in Shenzhen. So we were going to all these different restaurants and testing out the amazing payment tech that exists in China. Everything's powered by WeChat and Alipay. So everywhere you go, this is even like 5, 6, 7 years ago, and maybe even earlier, you would go into a venue and you would just scan a QR code and pay on your phone. And it was just this light bulb moment that for me, it was like, I am seeing the future here. This is where the West is going to go. At some point it's going to catch up with all of this. And I kind of had it in the back of my head. So I had that, the WeChat and Alipay experience, paying on your phone. And then I also went to a restaurant out there where it was the only place I was able to order myself, because it was a visual menu on your mobile phone. So you scanned it and you were able to construct your little burger on the screen. Okay. And I was like, this is bloody cool. Why is no one doing this outside of China? Anyway, I come back to the UK and I have this, I think I literally came straight back from Shenzhen and then went to Cornwall for like a trip or whatever. And I had to pay with cash. And I was like, what the hell are we doing? Like, everyone always used to explain it like, they're a developing country, like all of this stuff. It's complete rubbish. Like China is like 5-10 years ahead of the West. And I was like, okay, so I'm going to build this business with ChargedUp. I'm going to get a massive network on that. And eventually we can start doing the payment technology on the top of that network. Yeah. And obviously then a few years later, once we'd built the network, we got a load of sites on board, that kind of vision of doing the payments as well, it played out. We launched the second company, and that's where ServedUp all came from.
And was ServedUp self-funded, or did you need to raise funding for that?
So it was funded out of the money that we made from the sanitizer, and then we also raised another it's like another £7 million off the back of that. So, and
can you just go into the sanitizer business a little bit? I know it's not the sexiest business in the world, but the fact that you've built it in 12 months and exited within 12 months for a 7-figure sum, it's quite impressive, right?
It was it was a wild journey. It was literally, so my co-founder Charlie, roll back one step. So COVID comes, everything starts to lock down. We had 100 charged up stations ready to go into, I think it was some shopping centers, some train stations, etc. And there were these floor standing units that would hold the 2 charging stations on the front of it and allow you to go up to it and rent it. But obviously in a train station, there's no bar to put the charging station on. So we needed to build this enclosure. So we'd made these 100 units. They were sat in this factory up in Loughborough. And basically when COVID came about, we couldn't install them. So we were left with these 100 units. Like, what are we going to do with them?
Yeah.
We've just paid, I think it was like 50 grand or something to have these things made. And obviously we're not going to roll them out to deserted train stations. So Charlie came up with this absolute genius idea, which was to put a little pump on the top. So replace where the charging station would go, put a little pump on the top and then a bag to hold sanitizer underneath, and repurpose them into sanitizer dispensers. And because we had this manufacturing partner, it literally in the space of days, and you can go way back and look on our LinkedIn and YouTube and stuff. We used to do vlogs, like weekly vlogs of all this stuff. So you can see it all happening.
That must be quite
in
cool
real
to
time.
still look back on.
Yeah, it's super nice, and I love that we did that back then, because you'd be able to look back on it in years in the future. But yeah, we were literally putting it together and then coming up with these ideas, and then the manufacturer made a sample of it, and then we converted the first 100, and then we sold them to I think we basically said to our ChargedUp salespeople, we were like, guys, reach out to your network, see if anyone's interested in this. And then we sold 100, I think, to a care home or something.
Yeah.
And then next person comes in and they want like 250. And then it's like next person comes in and then they want 1,000. And then it just snowballed and snowballed. And then the big one that really flipped it over for us, that kind of put us on the map or whatever, this is all in the space of like weeks. This is not like months and months of time.
It's insane.
At the very beginning, we pitched, because we've been pitching to get ChargedUp into the tube stations.
Yeah.
So we used that same contact and we said, look, we're now doing the sanitizer stuff. Do you guys want some stations? And, we didn't think that we'd get it. We thought, one of the big proper companies would get that kind of deal. And for whatever reason, they decided to go with us. They said, well, actually, they gave us this ultimatum. They were like, Sadiq Khan wants to reopen the tubes. It was like, I think it was like on a Thursday, and it was like the following, like a week on Sunday from there. So you've got like, 11 days to do it. They were like, if you can get these units installed, branded, like everything, then you can have the contract.
Wow.
And for whatever reason, we said yes. And somehow we basically re-diverted some stock that was going to go to someone else, we didn't make them from scratch, because obviously you can't make something from scratch in 11 days.
Yeah, sure.
Rebranded them and managed to deliver them. There's a great photo of Boris going in and I think like opening the station or whatever, and Sadiq using them. It was all, big huzzah about it. And because we got that contract and, we had TFL on our client list, we then just started getting ridiculous numbers of contracts.
Wow.
Ended up delivering it was like 60,000 units in the space of a few months. Like,
that must have been such an exciting
That's
period.
insane.
Yeah, it was super weird.
Obviously very stressful and tiring and hard work, but obviously quite exciting.
Oh, it was honestly, it was such fun. And like the amount of weird stuff that we had to do. Like I remember one time we'd got this contract and we'd received the money from the person who'd paid for all these units. I had to go into NatWest because we didn't have the facility to transfer huge amounts of money. So I had to physically go to the branch and make a transfer of like £1 million or something to the supplier to pay to get these units manufactured. And they were like, this like 24-year-old or whatever is coming into the bank in the middle of COVID to transfer like millions of pounds. They were like genuinely, they were asking me like, has someone brought you in at gunpoint? Like, what's going on here? It was such a weird scenario.
I feel like with the sanitizing thing, I feel like that's got to be something in you, man, to have like to spot that and to be like, well, we can just use it for this, and be like, there's an idea in that, and then to just execute, and like that's a skill, but that's also like that's something innate in you. I don't think most people would think to do that on top of already, because you were already running ChargedUp at this point. So to think about that and be like, okay, we can't do that. How can we spin it? Okay, adapt, stick and move, and then find a way to make that work. That's seriously impressive, man.
Yeah, it was pretty fun.
We're literally this could go for hours. But as we're wrapping up, there's one question we like to ask all of our guests, basically, which is obviously, as you've seen from this, we're a very practical podcast. We're very big on like sort of the nuts and bolts of things and less on the motivational side of things. For anyone listening that might be either starting a business or they've already started one, if you could give one piece of practical advice to someone starting a business or looking to, what would that be? So it could be to do with marketing, budgeting, hiring, iteration, anything.
Yeah, I think, going back to kind of the first thing that we were talking about boiling down the idea to the MVP, like so many people I hear, you see it even on Dragon's Den as well, like these people who put hundreds of thousands of pounds of their life savings into making this widget or whatever that it turns out no one cares about. Like, I think get that piece of advice that we got right at the beginning around like, build this thing, because not only is it like, obviously it can succeed and it can do well, but it could also be the reason, if you build it and see if people want to pay for it, that could be the reason that tells you not to do that business. And like, maybe you learn that it's not going to be viable way quicker, way cheaper than spending hundreds of thousands of pounds to figure out the exact same result. So I think reading the, about the Eric Ries's like MVP stuff, all of that, I think it's so important to like figure out what is the boiled down version of your product or your idea or whatever you're trying to build, and get people to pay for it as quick as possible. Don't mess around with making a website or making some cool branding or any of this kind of stuff. Like, just figure out, are people going to pay for it as quick as possible with the least budget, the least amount of time, And yeah, that would be my biggest piece of advice. Don't waste time on other stuff until you figure that out.
Clinical.
Very good piece of advice.
Amazing. Hugo, thank you so much for that, man. Before we go, the floor is yours. Where can people find you or find Charged Up, or where do you want to send people?
Yeah, so we're on LinkedIn, on Twitter, Instagram, everything. It's all Charged Up, and Charged Up World, if that tag was not available. And then yeah, I'm on LinkedIn as Hugo Tilmouth. So yeah, I'd love to connect.
Hugo Tilmouth, thank you so much for an amazing conversation, man. Really. Wow, that was lightning. Guys, thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed, make sure to subscribe and turn on post notifications so you don't miss any future episodes. We've got some amazing guests coming soon. And if you're on Spotify or Apple Podcasts, make sure to rate us 5 stars and give us a review. And we'll see you in the next one. Hugo Tilmouth, thank you so much, man.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.